Buenos días, les damos la bienvenida al segundo día del 18º Congreso La Investigación en la Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. Investigar con esperanza para un futuro mejor. Damos también un especial saludo a quienes desde ayer están conectados de manera virtual y siguen la transmisión de este evento por los canales de YouTube de la Vicerrectoría de Investigación, Pesquisa Javeriana y Unijaveriana. Es un gusto poder reunirnos en este segundo día de Congreso que tiene como eje orientador la investigación ante la inteligencia artificial, ética y sostenibilidad. Antes de iniciar, los invitamos a apagar sus celulares, bueno, en este caso no apagarlos, sino tenerlos en silencio, y a prestar atención al video de seguridad del auditorio Alfonso Quintana.
Se encuentra en el auditorio Alfonso. Bienvenidos a la Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. Usted se encuentra en el auditorio Alfonso Quintana, Sala A y Sala B. Usted cuenta con personal entrenado como brigadistas, debidamente identificados, quienes lo orientarán, ayudarán y guiarán en caso de emergencia. Le recomendamos tener en cuenta las siguientes indicaciones. Identifique las salidas de emergencia. Ante una emergencia, siga las instrucciones del brigadista. Al recibir la orden de evacuación o escuchar la alarma, siga las siguientes instrucciones. Conserve la calma. Salga caminando rápidamente y conservando su derecha. Salga en orden y en silencio, llevando a las personas que estén a su cargo. No regrese ni permita que otros lo hagan. Si hay humo, avance gateando. No use el ascensor. No se detenga en las puertas de salida de emergencia. Aléjese del riesgo y evite la curiosidad. Siga la siguiente ruta de evacuación hasta llegar al punto de encuentro y permanezca allí hasta recibir nuevas instrucciones. Recuerde que somos un campus abierto y personas inescrupulosas se camuflan en los eventos. No pierda de vista sus equipos electrónicos. Cuide sus objetos personales. Gracias por su atención.
En esta mañana tendremos la conferencia What Does AI Sustain? Finding Balance in the Socio-Technical Design of Artificial Intelligence for a Sustainable Society, con Rob Comber, profesor del Royal Institute of Technology de Suecia. Después tendremos el conversatorio Ética y Sostenibilidad de la Investigación en la Era de la Inteligencia Artificial. De esta manera iniciamos entonces con el conversatorio. El Dr. Rob Comber es profesor asociado en comunicación y docente en interacción humano-computador, con especialización en comunicación y sostenibilidad del Royal Institute of Technology de Suecia. Él investiga la interacción humano-computador, estudia el uso social y colectivo de la tecnología en ámbitos como la democracia, la justicia social, la sostenibilidad ambiental y la alimentación. Su trabajo abarca aplicaciones en gobierno, educación, salud pública y gestión ambiental. Actualmente lidera proyectos sobre la gestión digital de los residuos, transformación de archivos coloniales y medios digitales para la paz. En esta conferencia, el profesor nos compartirá cómo su experiencia en el diseño de sistemas con inteligencia artificial lo ha llevado a reflexionar sobre la crisis climática y el papel activo que deben asumir los investigadores en la construcción del futuro. Su propósito es inspirarnos y a hacernos una invitación a que nos reconozcamos como actores de cambio capaces de aportar a una sociedad más sostenible. Para quienes lo requieran, tenemos la opción de la traducción en simultáneo. Para ello los invitamos, repito un poco el procedimiento, a descargar el primer QR para que se conecten a la red Wi-Fi de la universidad. Una vez hayan hecho esto, escaneen por favor el QR que está al otro lado y ahí podrán descargar la aplicación Interprefy. Esa será la aplicación que nos acompaña a lo largo de la conferencia. Después abren la aplicación en su celular y ya ahí van a estar, digamos, como conectados a esta sala. En el momento en el que el profesor comience a hablar, ustedes van a poder escuchar lo que él nos está compartiendo en español. Por favor, les recomendamos que quienes vayan a escucharlo de esa manera se pongan sus audífonos. En el caso de que no tengan audífonos, que por favor le bajen el volumen a su celular y le pongan la opción de Closed Caption para que salgan los subtítulos y así pues no haya una interferencia con los otros audios que van a estar en la conferencia. Si alguien requiere algún apoyo en este proceso, pueden levantar sus manos y los monitores que están en el auditorio les ayudarán en este proceso. Bueno, entonces sin más preámbulo le damos la bienvenida al profesor Rob Comber. Welcome, doctor.
Okay. Lo siento por no hablar español. My Colombian colleague said I should recognize I am una boleto. I practiced with Duolingo, but it wasn't enough. So thank you for sticking with me while I try to do this in English. And if I speak too quickly, someone can tell me to slow down. Today I want to talk about a balancing act. It's a balancing act in which we, researchers, professors, designers, engineers, lawyers, policymakers, maybe mostly students, have an active role in shaping the future. I want to think through the roles we have to create knowledge, to create technologies, and to create conditions for the future that we want. I want to work our way through this balancing act with a set of big questions. So big questions like, what does AI sustain? They're open questions that help me think through what I'm doing when I'm designing and understanding and studying socio-technical systems, AI and many others. I want to stress that my talk will be about making AI. I think maybe 4 of the 5 projects I talk about will have AI in them at some point. But I'm not a software developer or a computer scientist. I'm trained as a psychologist, and I work in the interdisciplinary field of human-computer interaction. I'm not the tech guy. I can't fix your printer or anything else, but I do try to do a lot of work to understand and translate what AI is for society. I don't think we always need AI, and that's one of the questions I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about how we make certain types of AI possible or impossible, how we make socio-technical possibilities. The topic I was asked to talk about was ethics and sustainability of research in the age of artificial intelligence. I think much of what I will talk about will swirl around this topic, but I want to, rather than drawing on it in every slide, talk now about how I see what I will talk about is related to this question. I want to borrow from a PhD student who's working with me, Kristina Popova, who is borrowing from Foucault to talk about ethics. Kristina, in her work, talks about and talks to designers who are making technologies to understand how they experience and work with ethics. A lot of what we see about ethics is guidelines, checklists, training, but she wants to understand how do they really make ethical decisions. And she talks about it as being developing ethics as subjectivities, ways of being in the world. They're not simple rules that are followed, they're positions we take as we work through the world, but we also learn them from the disciplines around us. This idea of ethics as subjectivities allows me to think about how we train ourselves and how we train our students. As a teacher, that's very important, to go out into the world. It's not just about objective science and fact, but also that we care about what we do in the world. I want to stress, for me, this is the future of research. This is the ethics and sustainability, is developing our subjectivities that allow us to build the futures that we want. It's about as much about the research that we do and why we do it and how we do it. And it's my attempt to encourage you to think about producing more than just knowledge, but the future world in which we will live. And now I want to turn to AI and sustainability, the elephant in the room, perhaps, and why I've come with some open questions. In about 2002, myself and my colleague, Alina Eriksson, were wondering how might we be able to think about the environmental impact of computing in particular in ways that were above individuals' responsibilities. We came across a proposed law called ecocide law. It's been proposed several times over the last few decades, but has been recently revisited and rewritten by some environmental lawyers and policymakers. Ecocide, the proposed law of ecocide, would make it a crime to commit environmental harm. I'll come to the definition in a minute. And it would be prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. It is already a crime during wartime to damage the environment, but for some reason it is not a crime during peacetime. So we wanted to understand exactly what it was that could computing be thought of as committing this kind of environmental harm. So this is the definition that is provided, the working definition, and this is what we wanted to check whether computing and specific instances of computing might actually be considered as committing ecocide. So for the purpose of this statute, ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment caused by those acts. Wanton is an unusual English word. I don't think many people use it in their daily lives. Someone suggested this was the translation of it. It is really only ever used in legal documents and almost only ever to talk about wanton destruction or wanton disregard. It is, in this sense, means destroying something while knowing that you shouldn't. Elina and I were interested in the extent to which the computing industry could actually be thought of as committing this wanton destruction. So we spent about a year looking at lots of research, lots of examples. It was a very difficult and emotional thing to read about some of the damage that was being seen. In the end, we wrote the paper. It was 4 pages long, and we actually had to just make it a little bit longer so that we could actually submit it for review. It was one of the shortest papers I've ever written, and it could have been replaced with just one word: yes. Computing across all of the categories was seen to be creating this kind of environmental harm that really exceeded what was reasonable. So in lots of the particular examples of things like Bitcoin, large language models, the extent of the environmental harm was huge and significant, and the only reason we couldn't say this is definitely ecocide already is because they were too new. So they hadn't been long-term damage associated with them. Now, this was the word yes would have been a very, very short paper, but it was a slight simplification of actually what we were finding. And one of the reasons was that in the proposed text of the law, there was the following clause, and it says, wanton means with reckless disregard for damage which would be clearly excessive in relation to the social and economic benefits anticipated. This sentence, and in particular the phrase in relation to socio and economic benefits anticipated, means that any attempt to identify the environmental harms of technology has to be balanced against its benefits. So I want to very quickly just work through what are some of the environmental harms that we already know about, and there's lots of research already pointing to this. The water use of artificial intelligence, and particularly in data centers, is expected to surpass 6.6 billion cubic meters by 2027. The water that is used in a data center, in a single data center, is enough to grow about 200,000 tomatoes in a year, which is a lot of tomatoes. It uses up approximately data centers use up approximately 400,000 acres globally. If that was all in great, wonderful land, arable land, it would be about 1.6 million tons of yields of something like corn or maize. But actually, most of them are built in places like deserts, which is terrible when you go back to number one, that they're using a lot of water. We also see that in other aspects, things that are not necessarily immediately clear. Data centers go through a lot of computing hardware, and there's been shown to be genetic damage in the landfill that is dealing with the e-waste. So there is long-term damage to certain types of life that go with these environmental harms. One of the examples that we included in the paper was the Atacama salt flats. It's losing just a little bit less than 2,000 liters of water a second. And that's on lithium mining to support all of the technologies we have, not just AI, but really rapid and strong environmental harm. And this was one part of what we want to talk about in this paper. It's not an environmental impact. It is all an environmental harm. It may have benefits that make it worthwhile, but we need to talk about it as a harm. There are also a lot of social injustices that come with it. I might have to come back and forth from the microphone for a little bit, but I just want to talk about one example. So if the average Colombian salary, I Googled it, so I don't know its accuracy, but if that is equal to about 1 meter, how far do you think Sam Altman, who is one of the co-founders of OpenAI, one of the leaders of the AI boom, how far do you think he can walk? Okay, the average Colombian annual salary is 1 meter. How far do you think Sam Altman is walking? You can take a minute. I won't give you a minute. I don't have time. You can think about it quickly. Okay. Okay, so it's a little bit further than the average Colombian. I'll figure out which one. So he can walk about 250 kilometers. On a map of Europe, this looks really impressive. You can walk really far. I was a little bit disappointed that Colombia was so big, but that's still quite a distance. I wouldn't want to walk 250 kilometers. Okay, so remember, it's 1 meter for the average Colombian. Maybe professors and others can go a few steps more, but this guy is walking 250 kilometers. How far do you think Elon Musk can walk? I've given you a hint. It's quite a bit further. So he can walk to Tokyo and back in that time. These are the figures. This is napkin math. The accuracy of it, I don't know, not 100%. But these are wealth inequalities that come from the accumulation of data and the accumulation of wealth. So, of course, a lot of Elon Musk's money does not just come from AI, but this has a huge difference. So just yesterday it was announced that about 25% of all electricity in Ireland, so I come from Ireland, although I work in Sweden, 25% of all electricity is being used by data centers. Ireland has the second highest electricity prices in Europe. It's not only because of data centers, but that's not helping. These wealth inequalities affect everyone, except maybe these two guys who have walked to Tokyo and back. So these are very real harms that are happening in society that are not necessarily because of just AI, but many of the environmental harms have knock-on effects that also include these social injustices. Now, I don't want to just focus on the negative side. I used AI to generate those pictures of Elon Musk. It is still useful. So I want to draw on this quote that I always go back to from Juno Salazar Paredes, who's writing about decolonizing extinction. So thinking about working in doing anthropology and an orangutan rescue, and looking at what does it really mean to sort of realize that around us some of the world is collapsing. And she says, this is not a time to fatalistically give up on caring how others try to eke out a living under dire circumstances. My purpose here is to encourage alternatives to what projected futures might hold by highlighting what can be observed. My hope is that we can seriously consider what could be otherwise. And that brings me to my first question. What does AI sustain? This is a question I want to ask how we look at the future of AI and say that we should continue with it. What our research on, with, and even against AI is sustaining. It is about taking very seriously this question as something that we should use ourselves. It is not answered for us out in the world. It's something that we need to be able to do ourselves. It is something that we are, AI is, and all socio-technical systems are some things that we are actively making and shaping, and we must take seriously the consequences of how what we shape is to come. I don't think we can answer this question in abstract, so I want to talk through with some 4 further questions that I like to use. So these questions, these 4 big questions, they help me to decide what kind of future is AI sustaining. So the first question, are people good? I want to use to ask ourselves if we are supporting people or fixing people. It might seem like a simple distinction, but we might often need to decide if people need help or if they can be helped. With the second question, who knows best, I want us to think carefully about who gets to decide what is knowledge. More than ever, especially with the proliferation of large language models, we often decide that knowing is equivalent to the most succinct definition or description. The ChatGPT summary of this presentation will be much more articulate than I am. With the third question, I want to briefly consider the inevitability of technology, but also ask what else could it be? This is a request to take seriously our consideration of alternatives. Finally, with the last question, I want us to think about a contribution to society, something that was brought up a lot yesterday in the inauguration speeches for the Congress. I felt like I should rewrite a lot of my speech after it yesterday with the strong values for social impact that are present in this university. And so when we are trying to contribute to the current social, political, and technical system of systems in which we exist, we ask, how do we want to move forward? How much do we want to maintain, or do we rebuild to sustain society? These are vast and, again, open questions. So let me quickly walk through each one with an actual case of design work that I've done to try and help show you what I use them for. So the first big question. We might think of this as a question in itself of ethics, whether people are good or bad. But that's not really what I want to get with it, although it is often a useful thing to think about. It's a question of what we can, in this case, think AI can do for people. In many cases, when we hear about AI, it's about replacing our jobs. Translator is number 3 on the list that Microsoft released, and now there is translation happening immediately. For me, it's not a good measure of actually what humans are good at, these things. What I learned a lesson, it was during my postdoc studies. I was working a lot around food and healthy eating. I was working with Philips Research, and they were very interested in basically recommending to people, here is what you should eat. And the answer is that you should eat broccoli, you should eat carrots, you should eat all the very healthy things and none of the bad things. At the time, I was living in a city that had significant problems of social deprivation. From out of the window, you could look in one direction, people would live 10 years longer than you, and you could look in the other direction at the back of your house and people would live 10 years less than you. There was an 18 years of difference in life expectancy between one neighborhood and another. When working in this, we were trying to design to support people in eating healthier food. And I came across a paper by Andrea Grimes Parker and Richard Harper called Celebratory Technology. This is an argument many of you will know now of some things like assets-based and capability-based research, which tried to make an argument for not holding a deficit model of people, but seeing that they were trying to live their best lives in the conditions that were available to them. So rather than trying to change individuals, I started to change how I approached research to think about changing the systems around them. Such an approach recognizes that people are not making bad choices, but often making the only choices available to them. So to talk about this in a more concrete design example, I want to take the case of urban regeneration. One of my students, Clara Curvillaro, was working in a housing estate in southeast London that was about to be knocked down and replaced. Now, this is a common process that housing estates fall into disrepair and then are basically just removed from the map. We were asked actually by the developer who was going to do the knocking down and replacing to come and work to help them build up a community so that when people moved in, there would be this sense of belonging that is very important for all urban projects, but in urban regeneration in particular. They wanted to build this new housing estate with this sense of community and asked us to come and build something. This is what we built. This is what Clara built. What unfolded from this point was a project where we worked with the existing community members, many of them who were being told they would have to leave their homes and move somewhere else, not to build a new community, but to record and make visible the existing community. We designed a device. It's a suitcase with a mobile phone in it, and when you press on the buttons at the front, it can record a message or play back the previous message that was recorded. It was designed to travel from home to home, so it would enter into someone's home, they would listen to the previous story that someone had recorded, record their own response, and then give it to a neighbor. It traveled from home to home, collecting stories of what life had been like in the estate, how people had helped each other with things like childcare, carrying washing machines up many flights of stairs when the elevators weren't working, really being a good community. The thing that the developer wanted was already there, they just didn't see it. The housing estate had a terrible reputation. It was in the national news media for drugs, murder, everything, but actually when we started talking to people, there was a very, very strong community that was there. We didn't do this in order to collect and archive this for history, for academic purposes. It was to give back to the community. They claimed it as their own. One person actually called it our baby, which was very moving and powerful. But it was an important statement of how technology could be designed to see people as good at being neighbors, as good at being a community, instead of trying to replace and erase them. This might seem like a strange design project, especially if you're coming from fields of urban design. This probably isn't what you normally work with. But actually had a very big impact on how the developer thought about regeneration processes across all of its sites in the UK. They wanted us to make about 2,000 of these, and we said no, because it would take too long, and Clara needed to finish her PhD. But what they really wanted to do was rethink how they did engagement with the people that were already living in their estates. So this turned a question of erasure and loss into something that was productive and sustainable. It is a question about histories, but I think it is one that we can apply in our research to questions of knowledge more broadly. So I want to move on to the next question of who knows best. In lots of situations, in lots of research projects, we think most often about the research as the researcher, the scientist as the expert. Sweden is very much based on an idea of being evidence-based in all its actions. But in lots of cases, and I was very delighted to see and hear Paulo Ferreira be mentioned yesterday, a lot of education and approaches to it in South America and the majority world take more radical approaches. And so asking this question of who knows best, we turn our attention elsewhere. I want to talk about a project I worked on for about 5 years now with 2 artists, one based in Sweden and one based in the Congo, and an ever-changing group of designers and community members. It was working with the remains of a cultural heritage archive, photographs or glass plate negatives that were taken by Swedish missionaries in what is now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo between 1890 and 1920. These have been forgotten about in Sweden. They sit in basements, they're falling apart in many cases, and we wanted to bring them back to the community, the villages where they come from, to actually try to start to make sense of them. I want to give you one example where I think I made a mistake as a designer. Maybe I shouldn't admit that in front of so many people, but it's important sometimes to realize we make mistakes when trying to do our ethical and sustainable research. So during this process, we'd been working for a couple of years with many different designs. We were trying to get people to engage with the images and having a lot of engagement and a lot of interest from villagers, but also things like the Department of Culture. We ourselves were running out of money. A familiar story, I believe, a lot of talk yesterday about how to get funding. I could do the rest of the talk just talking about funding, but I won't. We wanted to apply for funding. The funding opportunity that was available to us was very much about a traditional model of cultural heritage. So what we did, we wanted to try and do something that would fit within both. We said we would build an iPad application, this that you can see on the left, that would show people the images and allow them to kind of create their own knowledge, their own annotation of the images. Our idea in the long term was to turn this into a computational vision model, one that would allow us to much more quickly make sense of. There's thousands and thousands of images. There is no electricity in these villages. You can't sit there for the whole day and get people to do this tagging. But actually what we found when we did it is back once more to una boleta. I'll use that forevermore. What we realized in getting to this point, I'll just go back and I'll show you. We had set this up using our model of what a tagging system should look like. So we asked here for people to tag things. And when we asked them, they just didn't know what we were even talking about. They don't use Google, so they don't search for things. So they don't know what search terms are. They didn't know what a keyword was. I don't want to make a claim that they didn't have some concept of indexicality, that one thing could point to another, but just that the whole model that we would want to somehow separate out the image into some elements within it didn't make sense to them at all. So it was una boleta. What we found, I want to just give you one example, and this actually was where it was a really super embarrassing mistake, because we had identified already in lots of the old images as they had been turned into slides to be shown in churches in Sweden. And this is one of them. I don't know if there's anyone whose Swedish is better than mine, but on the right it says vegetation pathway. And if you can look at the image, you can see there is more there than just vegetation. There isn't even much of a pathway, but there is a lot of erasure that happens in the tagging of this image. And we were doing the same thing. We were asking people to take things that they thought were important and mark them and forget about everything else. We decided to try something very different and get people to narrate the slides rather than tag them. Now, this data doesn't so easily fit into the kind of computational vision model that we wanted. But this was a story that we can find no other recorded evidence that this was a common practice that was happening. So we were actually collecting important historical information by just changing how we were approaching this system. Now, we haven't got around to being able to do something with a large language model and these kind of texts, but there is still a possibility for AI there. But what I want to identify with this is a challenge of something called epistemicide, the destruction of knowledge, also a concept from Latin America. Now, epistemicide is a very serious and troubling tool of oppression. It is something coming from a colony I'm in my body very aware of, but I want to take some more light-hearted kind of examples. So here, as I was entering Colombia, I had to fill out a migration form. The migration form asked me for my first name and my second name. That was super easy, Rob Comer, no problems there. And then it asked me for my first name and my second name. And it insisted that I once again put in my first name. And I was very confused. I didn't know what to do here. I have other names. My full name is not Rob Comer. It's an Irish name, Robordo Mael Chiron. Nobody will be able to spell it. But I thought, okay, I need to put something in here, so I put in my first name again. And then I realized once I pressed submit that my new name in Colombia is Rob. So it was really nice. There's a ring to it. I actually like it. I went and I talked to my Colombian colleague. I said, Alejandra, I'm called Rob in Colombia. And she just looked at me and she said, now you know how it feels. In Sweden, she's only allowed to have two names. And she feels that's unfair. And I realized this is something that happens very, very often. So this is my daughter's health insurance card when we first got it first. Her name is not Box DA, just in case anyone is worrying. Her name is Ida. It's an Irish name with an accent on the I. The Swedish system just didn't know what that was. So I actually had to go through like passport control with this thing going, please don't ask the child what her name is because she's not going to say Box DA. I've also, from the Association of Computing Machinery, they should know what they're doing. They send me posts, so I work for them sometimes. My address is not Rob Comer, Sweden. Okay, there's another 2 lines in there with, again, characters that they do not know exist. I got this, so you can send me a postcard to Rob Comer, Sweden, it will arrive, but that's not my address. This is something that is called ASCII imperialism. It is one of the ways in which these computational systems, and we see it in lots of different ways, not just these dropped characters, but that they leave out some part of the knowledge, some part of the culture that we actually have. These letters are Irish letters, but they don't exist in Sweden, right? And there's no reason for that. If these systems are global, of course they should make sense for everyone. I want to share another example. I'm going to check the time because I realize I don't want to go too far over. I was invited to work with the Swedish peace agency, the Folke Bernadotte Academy, on some of their work in Afghanistan. So I was invited they wanted to do some more on-the-ground digital engagement, work that I've been doing for a long time in the UK and elsewhere. Unfortunately, because of COVID and also low levels of digital penetration in Afghanistan, we moved to something different, which was to support a community sector organization that was part of the negotiations that were happening in Doha between the government and the Taliban at the time. What we realized is we could actually use social media to sort of understand what were some of the aspects of the narrative that what people in public wanted was not being represented in government policies. We weren't doing just social media analysis, there was on-the-ground workshop, but actually amazingly there was all but one theme, which was that the online discussion showed a lot of discussion about Trump being president, which wasn't part of what people in Afghanistan were actually worried about, but everything else was the same. So people wanted more presence of women and women's rights in policy. They wanted not just a reduction in violence, but a ceasefire. And so we were working with this kind of text. At this time, we were using some natural language processing. If anyone is an expert on it, they can explain to everybody else later, but it was LDA, that's as far as my knowledge goes. And what it does is it tries to group different language together into clusters. So language that is used together is similar, and over a large data set, you then kind of try to bring it all together for things that make sense. So we did this. Here is one of the examples. I can't translate this for you, but it doesn't make a huge amount of sense at this level, and I translated it into English to try and translate everything into English so at least I can interpret it. But what we found was another example of the ASCII imperialism. The text didn't translate, the text couldn't actually be processed, and when it did, the clusters were just based on the languages that were in the data sets. So there was no actual interpretation, no sense-making or meaning-making that was happening. It was purely data, it was purely computation, and it didn't have this analysis behind it. Now, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I felt strongly like, okay, this is a win for qualitative research. We're going to win this one. And then I realized that there were about 1 million tweets that needed to be hand-coded. Now, this picture is blurry on purpose because it contains violence and hate speech and other things. But this is what I ended up working with. This is Excel. If anyone, I will tell you, please don't tell anyone, I became an Excel wizard trying to code 1 million tweets. You don't want to be an Excel wizard when someone is doing accounts anywhere. I had to actually go through these line by line to try and interpret what was being said, what it meant, and what that actually meant for the community organization that I was working with. The AI model behind it just couldn't make sense of it. Even when I looked at simpler things like sentiment analysis, which tells you if something is positive or negative, when I looked at some of the messages, they really were entirely incorrect. The sentiment would say it was positive when people were talking about there hasn't been a bombing today. There was one yesterday. Is that positive or not? These things were very hard to interpret for a system. But we've also seen just alongside this that a lot of the argument for this, like why would we use the AI tool to do this, is optimization. It would make it faster to do it. And it absolutely would have been faster than me going through 1 million tweets. But some of the research sort of shows that actually it's not quite as simple as it seems. What this is showing is, in terms of sustainability, when you start to use algorithms to process images, you get a lot of improvements in energy use. So on the left, this is the speed increase. So this is how much extra time you save in these processing of images. But on the right is how long does it actually take, with the expected amount of photographs that people will take, before the energy use exceeds that of the actual phone itself. Okay, so the right image is telling us how long do I have to keep my phone before all of this efficiency makes any sense at all. And for instance, the policy in my university is that we replace devices every 3 years. And this is ridiculous, and as a sustainability researcher, I just keep them for longer and don't tell anyone. But this is saying you have to keep your device for at least 3 years before any of the sustainability savings from the algorithm actually make any difference, because the majority of the impact or the environmental harm comes from the hardware itself. There's a lot of similar research. This paper by Gupta shows examples that the efficiency savings from a lot of these algorithms is now outpaced by people buying more phones, right? So an iPhone can be 10% more efficient, but if 100 more people buy them, that efficiency is gone, and the figures are much bigger than that. So really, some of these questions are not always about optimization or doing the fastest thing, but actually really considering what is being sustained. I want to give you one last example, one that gives me a little bit of hope about AI. So for the last 2 years, I've been working with a charity organization and a network of municipalities, the police and others, around youth recruitment into organized crime. It is the #1 social issue in Sweden and the Nordic countries at the moment. Has been a rapid increase in violence, but also violent crime. What we have been trying to do with this is to take all of these previous questions that I've said. Are people good at? Who knows best, and is technology the answer? And actually try and design a system that is not trying to replace the social workers. They know best, they know what they're doing. It is not trying to make them massively more efficient in the actual work that they do to care for people. It is trying to make them more effective and efficient in collaborating with each other. It's not about replacing them, it's not about removing from their jobs, it's about making them even more capable. And so what this is doing is basically something like ChatGPT or a large language model, but building it only on their knowledge. They send us the reports that they have, the data that they have, and we build this up in a much, much smaller scale, much more environmentally sustainable, but also socially sustainable, to try and think very carefully about what do they actually need. The system, these questions, it used to do many languages, and I thought I could get it to do it in Spanish, but it stopped. The center question, as an example, is summarize 10 central measures for government collaboration on the local level with children and young people. This is a question that a lot of our municipality partners want to know. How do we actually really work on the ground? And the system really helps them in 2 separate ways. One is, and we talk about it as being a really smart colleague. Okay, you have a question and you want to bounce an idea back and forth with them, this can really help them. The other way is that it's also like having 10 people in a room working for you if you need a summary of a report. The chief of the National Operative Association for the Police, he receives about 2,000 pages of reports on his desk every day. He can't read them. There's just no way that he has the time to do that and his actual job. But this helps him to make sense of it more quickly. And he's not doing that just assuming it's correct, but still doing it as an expert. So this system gives me some hope that we can use things like AI in different ways that are not about replacing people, that are building up the capacities that they have, the knowledge and expertise that they have, to build communities and to build networks, to tackle some really significant societal issues. So I want to start to draw to a close. I think I maybe have talked very fast or very slow, I'm not sure. Should have been a talk about ethics and sustainability of research in the age of artificial intelligence. I said from the start, I'm not an expert on the technical aspects of AI, but what I can see is that many of the ways in that we are trying to make it work for the communities, for the organizations, even for the companies that we work with, is about really carefully considering what is the AI that they need that we can give them and whether they need it in the first place at all. This is about, for me, developing these ethics as subjectivities, about taking a strong stance on not just building the latest AI because we can, but building it because it will be useful and because it will support the people rather than trying to replace them. If we want our research to be ethical and sustainable, I think we need to start thinking very carefully about what it means to be making technology, even when we're not the engineers that code them. And I know that many people here might not be the engineers that are coding them. We still have an active role in shaping what it means in society that we might have AI. Our research is important for talking about its possibilities and also its limitations. Across the cases that I've shown you, hopefully many of them about AI, I tried to show where we make decisions, where we develop our ethical sustainabilities, where we make mistakes, to produce futures that are more sustainable for those that live in them. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I hope we can take questions.
Bueno, en este momento encontrarán un QR en la pantalla. Quienes tengan alguna pregunta para el profesor Rob, les pedimos escanear el código y poner su pregunta. En lo posible, si lo pueden hacer para ganar más precisión, les pedimos hacerlo en inglés. Si no lo pueden hacer en inglés, no hay ningún problema. Tenemos un equipo también que lo puede traducir. Y nosotros le haremos directamente las preguntas al profesor Rob. Entonces vamos a dar un momentico para quienes tengan las preguntas, escaneen el QR y hagan este proceso. Muchas gracias. Bueno, ya estamos recibiendo varias de sus preguntas. Okay, teacher, thank you. The first question is, what about AI and education? What about AI and classroom evaluation process?
It's a really big challenge. Right now, our university is trying to come up with just a policy that says, if you use AI, you need to tell us. That's how far we've got. We don't have a great process for actually understanding how much students are using it, but we see if you ask students to review a research article and write a report about it, the report is from 90% of the students at least partly by AI. One of the aspects that I've tried to use is to get them to think critically about the actual output and the bias that's within it. So one example, I ask them something very simple. Okay, so ask ChatGPT or Gemini or something else, describe Stockholm for a tourist. You get some nice text, Stockholm is a beautiful city, it's full of nature. Okay, now ask ChatGPT, describe Stockholm for a female tourist. Stockholm is a very romantic city, the light is beautiful. Okay, now ask ChatGPT, describe Stockholm for a male tourist. Stockholm is an adventurous city. There is a lot of outdoor activities, you can go hiking. It's not hard to see that there's a problem with what ChatGPT is outputting. What we need to do is step that up when we ask them, okay, ask ChatGPT to review this article. Now think about, ask ChatGPT, can you summarize this article for an engineer? Mm-hmm. Can you summarize this article for a designer? Can you summarize this for a lawmaker? And they start to see that actually there are biases in it. It can help them. It can help them to get a first interpretation or support them, but they need to think carefully about the answer. It's not the answer. It is an interpretation, and they need to do some work around it.
Thank you, Professor. The second question is, how to control the use of AI in the education area, especially in new generations? Similar.
Same question, we don't. I think in my classes, like I said, the university has really just realized that you can't say no. There is no system. We used to have a system for plagiarism called Turnitin, and it worked pretty well to tell you whether a document was plagiarized. They don't work anymore for generated text, at least. So we can't really control it. So instead, it's about trying to move our assessment, move it to different forms of learning that help us to actually demonstrate the students are fulfilling the learning outcomes, not just ticking a box. And unfortunately, some people are moving back to exams, so handwritten exams, which the students hate. But I think it's really about moving some of our own thinking about what assessment looks like.
Okay, thank you. The third question is, what techniques can we use to decrease the environmental impact?
Again, I think a lot of this is a technical response to it, but I think a lot of it is about thinking about smaller scale AI systems. So with the one for trying to fight against organized crime, it is a small scale model. It may be 1,500 documents that are supporting it. So actually the training, the processing, the use does not consume as much energy. There isn't a big data center that is using this. I think we also need to, with our users, talk about that cost so that they know that it's there, that it's not something that's magic that's happening in the background.
Okay, thank you very much. The other question is, what recommendations do you give us for regulating the use of AI in the public sector?
I think that's a really great question. I would love to know more about the public sector in Colombia to be able to answer that question. I think that it's very similar to what we're seeing with the, it's called the IBOB project, I'll use that as a shorthand, is thinking about making sure the biases, that the environmental cost is clear, and we have a whole section of what we work with, which is under the banner of computer security, but actually we talk about lots of what that means in terms of what was the cost to society of having all of this data in one place. You can imagine in this case, there's a lot of data about young people at risk, so children who are at risk of being involved in organized crime. That data should not be publicly used, right? That shouldn't be available for anyone to see. And so we have to be very, very careful about making sure that these conversations happen, that data sharing, data cleaning is one of the first things that people are thinking about.
Okay, thank you very much. The last question is, what changes do you think should be made to scientific publication policies to strengthen ethics and AI research?
Can you repeat the second part? Sorry.
What changes do you think should be made to scientific publication policies to strengthen ethics and AI research?
I think that we will see probably within publication policies a move towards a similar statement about actually what is the environmental or the use of AI and the environmental impact of that. So I work with the Journal of Transactions and Computer-Human Interaction, TOCAI, which is at the ACM. And we are actively sort of thinking about what are the requirements that we can have for people to be clear about the use of AI and also to kind of link that to different forms of ethics. So for the longest time, it has been possible to write an ethics statement in your methods section which said, this was approved. And that's not really enough when we now know that so much of what's unfolding around systems like AI, and particularly in some of these sensitive topics, you need to have a much more developed kind of understanding of ethics as an ongoing and relational process. So we're hoping that we can include at least 3 elements. Maybe authors won't be happy about 3, but one is how much was AI used in the generation of it, what is the environmental impact of the paper, and then a longer description of the ethical procedures that happen.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Ahora los invitamos a participar del conversatorio Ética y Sostenibilidad de la Investigación en la Era de la Inteligencia Artificial. Este espacio nos invita a una reflexión colectiva sobre el impacto de la inteligencia artificial en los procesos investigativos, reconociendo tanto sus dilemas éticos como sus oportunidades para ampliar y diversificar las prácticas de producción de conocimiento. Se busca construir una visión crítica, responsable y esperanzadora para avanzar hacia prácticas investigativas más éticas y sostenibles. Para eso, invito a pasar a nuestros panelistas. Doctor Juan Camilo Contreras. Juan Camilo es doctor en Derecho por la Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, magíster en Derecho y abogado de la Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. Es profesor de la Facultad de Ciencias Jurídicas de la Javeriana, especializado en Derecho Penal y Proceso Penal. Su investigación aborda la teoría del delito y los sistemas de justicia penal, integrando análisis dogmático y una visión crítica de los retos contemporáneos del derecho penal. Bienvenido. Doctor Andrés Alberto Lombana Bermúdez. Es doctor en Media